A little over a week has passed since The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, or the sequel to the Breath of the Wild, was revealed at E3 2019 in a Nintendo Direct. And since then, many questions have arisen, including why this game is going to be a sequel and not a brand new game. And through an interview with Kotaku's Jason Schreier, things have become more clear, because Eiji Aonuma has been able to explain a little bit more than just the game being darker than Majora's Mask. And Jason Schreier asked in his interview, which you can find in the description down below, on the Breath of the Wild sequel, what made you and the team decide to make a sequel to Breath of the Wild as opposed to a new Zelda game? Aonuma answered then, when we released the DLC for Breath of the Wild, we realized that this is a great way to add more elements to the same world. When it comes down to technical things, DLC is pretty much data. You're adding data to pre-existing title. And so when we wanted to add bigger changes, DLC is not enough. And that's why we thought maybe a sequel would be a good fit. So Schreier then asked, was this sequel originally planned as DLC? Initially, we were thinking of just DLC ideas, but then we had a lot of ideas and we said to ourselves, this is too many ideas, let's just make one new game and start from scratch. To give you a little bit of insight into this, which led the process over from another expansion pass or 2 DLC packs, top of Trial of the Sword and the Champion's Ballad, we need to remember one thing, and that is that the development of the DLC of Breath of the Wild began shortly after the full game was concluded, or actually a little bit before. The planning started a little bit before. But the development started around the turn of 2016-2017 with the announcement of the DLC in February 2017. That will say a little bit of around a month after the Nintendo Switch presentation and the announcement of the release date of Breath of the Wild. And at that point, they announced 2 DLC packs within 1 expansion pass. As already mentioned, Trial of the Sword and the Champion's Ballad, but apparently the Zelda team had way more plans for additional DLC and ideas. After all, we need to remember that Breath of the Wild is Nintendo's most expensive game to date. The creation of the game engine, the physics engine, didn't only cause substantial delays to the game and the base product, which came out in 2017, but also cost Nintendo a whole lot of money. And the Zelda team really loved working with the Breath of the Wild engine, so they wanted naturally to expand on the experience, and that was the result we got through the 2 DLC packs and the 1 expansion pass. But it seems like the Zelda team was planning even more expansion passes, but at one point they realized that there would just be too much space required for Switch owners to download, since the Switch has limited memory and otherwise you need SD cards. And they thought that from a financial standpoint, but also from a practical standpoint, it would be much better to just make a sequel, expand on the story, add new dungeons, and also other themes. And this approach is very interesting because it's identical to the one found in Majora's Mask. And not surprisingly, it happened at the initiative of Eiji Aonuma, who, after being tasked to make an expansion for Ocarina of Time with additional dungeons and expanding some of the overworld, said that I can develop a brand new game, a sequel to Ocarina of Time, within 1 year. And that's how Majora's Mask started its existence, as an expansion to Ocarina of Time, which turned into a direct sequel. And it looks like the situation was more or less identical, only in this case there were no bets involved, but it was more of a question of there was a will to reuse the engine that they had worked so hard on and took very much time, caused multiple delays, but also to expand on the story, because many hoped for a post-game in Breath of the Wild which never took place, since the 2 DLC packs, Trial of the Sword and the Champion's Ballad, took place before the final battle against Calamity Ganon and Dark Beast Ganon. And this is also something thematically we might see, since Trial of the Sword is all about powering up your Master Sword, while the Champion's Ballad is the story in many ways of the Sheikah, the wisdom side of things, and Zelda, while the Breath of the Wild sequel has a heavy emphasis on the color green, the Zonai tribe, the warriors, and the color green, which we all know is associated with the goddess of courage, namely Furore. So it looks like they have been going for all three of them, and that this could have been a last expansion pass, but it just grew too big of size, and now they decided to make it a proper post-game instead, and make it a dedicated sequel with a brand new story, with Zelda being part of it, and naturally also with new challenges, new dungeons, and hopefully some new areas as well. We still don't know if we'll be stuck in Hyrule or move somewhere else, as the trailer was a little bit uncertain about that. It may have revealed just a new dungeon, it might bring us out of Hyrule, but based on what we have seen so far, it looks like all the ideas they had for DLCs while developing Breath of the Wild is now being implemented into its sequel. And that is a very interesting thing to note, because many of the ideas that they had in the development process was published in Masterworks. But not only that, it seems like they had additional ideas, because let's remember, Masterworks came out around a year after, so shortly after the last expansion pass was out. So it looks like many of the ideas that they had for additional DLC was deliberately taken out of that publication. So in many ways, we have a brand new experience with ideas we don't know about, either that were not talked about in Creating a Champion, and so on. But this is also another good news regarding the sequel of Breath of the Wild, and that is that the development probably began before the end of 2017. You see, Champion's Ballad was finished probably in November 2017, and right after that, they just started developing the next Zelda game. Why? Because it was supposed to be another DLC, another expansion pass. So they just continued what they had been doing to that point. Only that the decision of making a sequel was probably taken way before that, say sometime around March, April to summer 2017, and that they were already, while completing the Champion's Ballad, thinking up ideas and also creating the basis for the sequel of Breath of the Wild, which would give the Breath of the Wild 2, the sequel to Breath of the Wild, a development time to this point at close to 2 years right now. And by the end of 2017, that will mean that the game has been in development for close to 3 years. Way more than enough time to finish a sequel by reusing its assets, weaponry, locations, and characters, because these are things that Nintendo doesn't have to think about anymore. With all this information, it appears more than likely that the sequel to Breath of the Wild could be playable at next year's E3 2020, which makes sense since we have both Sony and Microsoft showing off their hardware, and Nintendo needs to have a big seller in the holiday season to be able to keep up and compete with the new systems. And that would naturally be the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the most successful Zelda game of all time. So it looks like the development has been progressing very steadily, and it doesn't look like we'll be facing any delays. When they said that the sequel to Breath of the Wild now in development, it probably meant that they didn't want to come out with any dates, because Zelda games are notorious for being for delays. Even Majora's Mask back in the day was delayed. 3 years, however, should be more than enough when you already have the engine, physics engine, and most of the content that will be present in the game. You just add new stuff on top of the existing ones. So the question is, what do you think about all of this? Do you think we could see the sequel, or Breath of the Wild 2, in 2020, that will say the holiday season? Or will we have to wait until, say, spring or later on in 2021? We would love to see your reply in the comment section down below. And also, this video was recorded while I was still in LA waiting for my flight back to Norway, so expect an increasement of videos and also improvement in audio quality when I get back to Norway after Retro Spillmessen this weekend. So guys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in to this video. We are all excited for the prospect of a Breath of the Wild sequel that started as DLC and that will be darker than Majora's Mask. which is fitting because Majora's Mask was also, as we already mentioned, started as an expansion to Ocarina of Time and ended up as a sequel. If you haven't already, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, plus press that shiny notification bell as we have plenty of upcoming Breath of the Wild sequel topical videos, theory videos, and way more on the way. Finally, we want to thank all our gracious patrons, including Kenyatta Ali and Bradley Carriage, for their support to the realm as royal producers. You can join them too by heading over to patreon.com/commonrealm. Until the next video, guys, this was Conrad of the Commonwealth Realm, and we will see you girls and guys soon.